were 5,000 deaths from nuclear power a year, which there aren't, the legacy press and the left-wing liberal types would be all over that like mad. But the fact that there are 40 million people or thereabouts a year who die from indoor pollution from using substandard fuels, which, by the way, are not environmentally friendly in the broader sense either, that just goes under the radar completely. And so you look at facts like that, and that's a bloody, blatant fact, that one. And it's children that are disproportionately affected on that front, too. And then you also look at the willingness of the so-called leftists who are hypothetically in favor of the poor to impoverish the poor as a consequence of their non-effective green policies. And you really have to ask, well, just what the hell is driving this? And the only answer that I can think of is that it's something fundamentally predicated on envy, and that the desire to bring down the capitalist system that produces those who are richer than the typical environmentalist, let's say, that takes precedence over everything. It takes precedence over care for the poor. It takes precedence even over hypothetical care for the planet. It's like tear the bloody capitalist system down, and it doesn't matter what or who gets destroyed in the process. Because otherwise, how do you explain it? Like the indoor air pollution fact alone, it's like that's incomprehensible. Obviously, the thing to do is to get cheap energy that's clean as possible, to developing countries as fast as possible. And then, on the environmental side, the stats are pretty damn clear that if you can get the gross domestic product of a country up to something averaging approximately $5,000 US a year, then people start taking a long view and caring about the environment. And so it's quite obvious that if we did everything we could to eradicate absolute poverty, mostly by driving energy prices down, then we could get people off of their reliance on those primitive biofuels that poison them and poison the planet and denude the territory, and we could get them caring about the environment. And so why not do that?
Okay, now do you want to become Premier of Alberta? Because this is exactly the points that I want to see made on the international stage. And I don't know why it's so hard to get these messages out. It does seem, and maybe it is, that we're facing something that is more of a culture war underneath the surface, that we think it's about solving environmental issues, and we think it's about caring for those who are vulnerable, and we think it's about obliterating international poverty. And it's not. It's about something else altogether. And I would say I need to be very, very clear, because I know the world keeps on talking about some transition to some other fuel that might someday exist in the future. And I'm going to tell you that our messaging here is going to be very, very different. We are not going to transition out of oil or natural gas. We're going to transition away from emissions. We're going to produce these products in a way that has lower and lower emissions, and we've got great technology to be able to do it. We're learning how to capture CO2 and to embed it into products to make them more durable, or bury them underground. We're talking about developing out our hydrogen economy. LNG is going to be one way that we're able to reduce more polluting fuels around the world and reduce global emissions. But when you start doing all of these things, one of the things I don't think is well understood is that out of a barrel of oil comes about 6,000 different products. And not all of them are combustion, about 70% of them aren't. We've got lubricants and plastics and building material, asphalt. So even the enthusiasts of zero-emission vehicles, they're going to need roads to drive them on, which means that we are going to need to produce bitumen. And if we can produce bitumen with lower and lower emissions, then this is a win for everybody. This is a win for the environment, it's a win for the economy, it's a win for affordability, it's even a win for the environmentalists, though they don't realize this. And so we need to get away from any notion that these fuels are going to be kept in the ground. I think it's as ludicrous to talk about phasing out oil and natural gas as it is ludicrous to talk about phasing out concrete or phasing out steel. We are increasingly using our base products for construction materials, for plastics, and we are always going to need to have those. And as Michael Schellenberger has pointed out again quite brilliantly, is that when you start using these types of alternative construction materials, it means that you don't need to go to the natural environment to be able to harvest them there. And so you're able to preserve more habitat, and you're able to preserve more of the environment. We just need a paradigm shift in how we talk about the environment.
I like knowing exactly where my meat comes from. And with Moink, I know it's coming from small family farms all across the country. Moink delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork and chicken, and sustainable wild-caught Alaskan salmon straight to your door. Moink lets you choose the meat delivered in every box. Select an existing box or create your own. Set your delivery cadence and enjoy delicious meat. You can cancel anytime, but you won't want to. If you're not sure where to start, check out their standard box. It comes with a little bit of everything: chicken, ribeye, burgers, and steak. Moink is all about supporting the family farm. Think about it this way: 2% of Americans are farmers, but 100% of Americans eat. We need to show our support for the families that keep us well fed. After receiving my first Moink box, I was floored. The salmon and chicken are both fantastic, and the steak might be the best I've ever had, and keep in mind, I cooked it myself. With a freezer full of Moink products, I can without a doubt say it is a fantastic deal on a ton of delicious and well-produced products. You won't be disappointed, and you can rest assured all of Moink's meat comes from wholesome American farmers. So keep American farming going strong by signing up at moinkbox.com/JBP right now, and Dr. Peterson's listeners can get free bacon in your first box. And let me say, it's the best bacon you'll ever taste. I re-upped my subscription because I ran out too fast. MOINK box.com/JBP. That's moinkbox.com/JBP.
You said you don't necessarily think that what's going on is about the kind of micro issues that you just described, and I think that's absolutely true. You know, I've been working with conservatives internationally and centralist liberals too on the construction of something like a more profound underlying traditionalist narrative. And I think what's happened too is the conservatives, the traditionalists and the liberals increasingly have been set back on their heels by the increasingly strident moralistic claims of the radical leftists and haven't really been able to respond to that properly and have been, in some sense, what would you say, the victims of their own guilt. You know, because the thing about conservative types is that they tend to be conscientious. And so if you go after them for not doing their duty, they tend to take that quite seriously. And so when the left levies accusations of less than dutiful behavior against conservatives, the first thing the conservatives do is get guilty. It's like, well, we probably could pollute a little less more. We could be a little less sexist. We could be a little less racist. We're sorry. It's like, it's time to stop being sorry. It really is on the conservative front to say, look, your bloody policies are not only raising energy prices to levels that are absolutely unconscionable, but certainly dooming a large percentage of the population in the world and in the Western world as well to undue poverty and privation. And you're not doing a damn thing on the planetary front. In fact, you're making the situation worse. And so we've had enough of your cheap moralizing. We're going to go ahead with what the adults do, which is to deal with the world as it is. You know, I got some stats from Bjorn Lomborg recently. I just wrote an article for The Telegraph that's quite popular about delusional, genocidal globalists and their willingness to sacrifice the poor. And Lomborg pointed out that the International Energy Agency and the Biden government have both projected that we won't be at 100% renewable energy till at least 2240. Right, not 2035 or 2050. That'll still be at best at something like 20%, assuming everything that's planned works out, which it won't. And so the idea that we're going to somehow transition to these magical technologies that are just going to suddenly appear is absolutely preposterous, even when you don't take into account the facts that you laid out, which is we make all sorts of other things from oil. And so what are we going to do? Stop making them? It's like, well, maybe, because you don't need those if you're going to decrease your carbon load. You know, I mean,
we're never going to get to 100% renewable. I may as well just put that on the table. Because when you think about what you need to get to 100% renewable, especially if you're talking about battery power to back it up, where are we going to get the lithium and the cobalt and the nickel? You have to mine the surfaces in order to do that, but the environmentalists are opposed to mining as well. Every time you try to get a mining operation going, you've got a wall and an army of environmentalists trying to stop you there also. You have to move a lot of earth in order to be able to develop all of those resources to be able to feed the battery power, and you have to use a lot of landscape in order to put on the solar panels and the wind turbines.
I think Lomborg has estimated that there is something under 10 minutes of battery power, sufficient battery power in Europe to power the European power grid at the moment. Something like, I think it's actually 3 minutes. It's somewhere between 3 and 10 minutes. And all the vaunted improvements in battery technology that we're supposed to be zipping along like mad by now haven't manifested themselves. And so that's a non-starter as well.
Well, let me tell you what I think the future is, honestly. And I think Canada is well on its way in helping to develop this future. I think hydroelectric power is the future. I think nuclear is the future, particularly small modular nuclear reactors, which we're going to be rolling out in Ontario and New Brunswick very shortly. And then on top of that, developing natural gas and using carbon technology to capture the emissions so that you're not putting anything into the atmosphere. Those to me are and perhaps even geothermal. We have to be looking at ways that you can get secure, reliable base load that doesn't have a huge external impact on the environment across the whole range of environmental impacts. And I think we have to get away from this idea that solar and wind are the only answer. It's sort of interesting you said that there's this envy or this hostility to capitalism. I see it a little differently. I feel like those on the other side of the spectrum have their own favorite capitalists that they like to support, and because there's
like pharmaceutical
a lot of
companies?
subsidies. Well, there's a heck of a lot of subsidies that go to wind and solar panels, solar power as well. And so I think really that's what we're seeing is that there's a multi-trillion-dollar market at play here, and that we've got two different interests that are lining up. And one of those interests on the other side is also seeking to have a huge amount of government support for it. And I tend to believe in free enterprise. If something is going to be supported, it should be able to be supported on the basis of the market, that it's the best use of the resources, the lowest cost, delivering the best product for the lowest price. That is how we're supposed to be operating. If we're going to be operating from a position of crony capitalism, where you just have to get your guy elected and then you can secure a bunch of grants so that you can push your agenda forward, that's I think what has been driving things for the last 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, well, I also think that's another undiscovered area for genuine traditionalists, conservatives and liberals alike, to start making headway on the moral front, is that a little less crony capitalism would be a good thing, because crony capitalism is really fascism, to give it its proper terminology. Mm-hmm. And this collusion between huge industry and huge government, that's got to stop. It's not the free enterprise market that properly responds to transformations of demand and supply. It's top-down collusion, and it's aided and abetted by very large players, and that's really got out of hand as well. I think the Conservatives would do well to address that as much as they possibly can.